All difficulty is amused by convenience. All difficulty in life is ameliorated by access to convenience. And of course, convenience is bought at the cost of massive exploitation of all living resources. Humans, of course, but even as technology replaces human inputs into the system, that exacerbates the exploitation and oppression of the fucking biome that is carried out by capitalism. And sheer waste. Of course, you people saw the video of them smashing new laptops and phones in a British Amazon warehouse. Imagine the human misery that goes into the production of one of those fucking machines, one of those laptops. You guys probably are aware of this. If you're on here trying to exercise the political ghost from your body, if you're watching this stream, you know what goes into your smartphones and your laptops in terms of what physically goes into them. Sure, they're manufactured in the end state in factories in Asia, which are, essentially modern sweatshops. Sure, but far more horrifying than that is that there are precious metals within these machines that that can only be accessed in regions of the world that are the end point of colonial plunder, the end extraction point, the contours of the Cold War, I would say. The whole wars of the 20th century, the conflict between capital and humanity that defined the 20th century and was won by capital. The Second World War and then Cold War eras was as a civil war amongst humanity over who was going to be eating shit for the next 100 years. What way the human centipede of progress was going to be pointed. And the winner was the people who weaponized capitalism into a national and then civilizational weapon, a tool of domination of other systems of economic life, other systems of social life. It was, as Niall Ferguson called it in one of his dumb books, the killer app, like the stuff that created modern capitalism. The soil that capitalism was built in, which was medium state conflict in a context of technological innovation and restraint and a restraint of resources and flows of trade and stuff. The ferment of early modern Europe and Renaissance Europe, especially after the fucking Black Death, which had come along to wipe away all of the contradictions that had been accumulated by feudalism. Because feudalism had reached, I think not enough is made of this, is that at the point that the Black Death hit Europe, feudalism had reached its terminal point of internal contradiction. It had become completely frozen. It could not respond to conditions. You had in pre-plague Europe, you had this Malthusian pressure of population growth. You had deflation of the currency. You had a breakdown of trade networks. You had a liquidity crisis, essentially. There was no way to facilitate trade, and that's because the social forms were not amenable to what capitalism necessitated, which was the introduction of relationships of estrangement, of social estrangement that were not conceivable by the feudal world because the feudal world necessitated these social bonds. The thing that kept feudalism together was not authoritarianism from the top. There was not enough technologically exertable power at the top of feudalism to do that. Nobody had enough power to assert their will individually. It was a bunch of people on swords with sticks. What they had was social technology. That is the bonds of family, clan, religion that gave people a investment in the outcome of the social project, even if they were getting fucked by it. Even if they were serfs, the thing that kept them from rebelling. And of course, some of them would and when conditions got worse in parts of Europe, some of them would rebel, and you'd have a peasants' revolt. You'd have a bunch of people massacred. But those are the punctuations that move you forward to resolve the political problems inherent in your mode of production. But by the eve of the Black Death, Europe was completely stagnated. Feudalism had reached its terminal crisis. And that's when Malthus intervened in the form of the Black Death. Now, the flip side of this, and the reason that Malthus is not a complete description of reality, and why it is almost always pointless to bring up Malthus, is that Malthus did not take into account that technological response to crisis that a civilization, as opposed to just a bunch of wild animals, can come up with. Things like the Green Revolution. Things like fucking antibiotics for a while. I mean, eventually they don't work, but in a near term they fix some of these Malthusian questions. But there was no sufficient technology that had been brought to bear, at least in Europe, by the developments of slave society and then feudalism that had happened up until that point, to accommodate this crisis. So it was solved by Malthus. And in the form of the Black Death, 50% of the population gone. Social fucking bonds were literally uprooted by the hand of God. And the people who were left were in a condition where land was much more bountiful. Labor was much scarcer, which meant that the deal that the peasants could strike for their labor became destabilizing to the rule. Peasants who could have access to land independent of your ability to coerce them, which existed after the Black Death, necessitated a change in social relationships. It necessitated the ability to coerce outside of social bonds, outside of like a religious understanding, something estranged to a market mechanism that transcends all human relationships and that replaces God. And so that system wasn't going to sustain itself. If it had persisted, what would have happened is that the ruling class would have been expropriated by the peasantry, because the numbers game would have kicked in. And eventually they would have said, what the fuck do we need you for? Our self-organizing like urban and rural communes are using the mutual aid networks that were implicit and inherent and unspoken in a bonded social order that feudalism represented. We can just manage this shit ourselves. What the fuck do we need you assholes in your fucking fancy frilly outfits and your castles? Oh, it's because so you guys can all fight it out over control? We never have any say in it. So what happened is that the ruling class, the ruling feudal elite, to protect their near-term interests, destroyed their long-term interests. Because short-termism is the endemic vocabulary of a crisis. There is no long-term, so you only think short-term, and that's what the feudal lords did. And they sustained and they allowed for the creation of this merchant culture in the cities. Protestantism was like fucking gasoline on the fire of that. They let this happen because they were in a contest for power with other powers. And by that point, you had a stable state system, especially after Westphalia at the end of the 30 Years' War, that creates a situation where, all right, you have fixed environments. Now you're going to compete over resources. And there is no superseding authority. God cannot help you. This is pure might. And the only way to win that fight is to be more efficient. And the only way to be more efficient is to replace the local and the temporally fixed social life and imagination and culture and economy of the feudal order and replace it with a depersonalized, alienated, symbolic economy. You take the rule that persisted in the symbols of religion, the cross, and replace it with the symbol of currency, of exchange, of the market. And that is the transition. You kill God and replace it with the market, because the market becomes the thing we all actually worship. It's the only thing that actually motivates us. And it is, unlike God, totally alienated from man, as it has to be to facilitate this level of exploitation. The level of exploitation that would allow you to say, to get back to the fucking laptops they destroyed in England, that the horrifying spear point exploitation that is no different than primitive accumulation in the Iron Age, of putting guns to people's neck and making them dig fucking metal out of the ground, the same way that slaves did in Italy. 2,000-year tradition, technology and culture and refinement and all the better angels that Steve Pinker talks about, none of them exist there. There's been no progress, because that point of maximal exploitation has never been alleviated. The boot has never come off the neck. But that happens so abstracted from us. The levels of responsibility are so far from us. Our sense of responsibility as beneficiaries within a system that pulls that shit out of the ground in Africa through the accumulated, hyper-exploited slave misery of people, that pain goes into that work, that labor. The labor that has to be slave labor because there's not enough money you could pay someone to have them do it. And they have to do it that way to make it profitable to do. Otherwise, you have to use technology, and technology costs money. As long as you can buy human labor at the price of somebody holding a gun and not somebody actually doing the work, because you can pay somebody a hell of a lot less to stand around with a gun than you would have to pay somebody to go into a hole and dig out the fucking earth and dig the shit out of there. That no one would think of destroying a fucking computer that was produced by that kind of horror if they felt at all responsible for it. And at no point of the system that allows for that thing to be made and then smashed has anyone had to interact with it. If they were in the fucking pit with the person, if they were watching, they would have to come to terms with it. They would either become the guy with the gun, or they would fight on behalf of the person being forced. You would have to do one or the other. If you sat there next to that long enough, you would have to do one or the other. But the reason that this thing is going to kill the earth is because every scream is going unheard. The scream of the earth, the scream of the fucking trees, the scream of the animals, the scream of the fucking air, the scream of the oceans, the scream of every person who is being mutilated spiritually and physically to service this fucking thing are all unheard. Because there's no one who is there in the room to hear them. The person in the room hearing that, the guy holding the gun in that room, he's got bigger fucking problems, man. His choices are being at this end or being at the other end. And when you have that choice, of course that's the one you're going to make. But you, comfortable beneficiary of this product, you don't have that relationship to that moment. You've been civilized. Your distance from violence and exploitation, your distance from power and the exercise of power has made it so that you get to enjoy the benefits of these things without considering the cost. And the system continues producing these outcomes, the fucking poisoning and acidification of the ocean, the destruction of the fucking biome, the maximization of the human population spiritually and physically, the reduction of the fucking carrying capacity of Earth through microwaving of the fucking atmosphere. None of those are being counted. No one is thinking about them when they make a decision, because that is on somebody else. Because like I said, when you're in the room with the most powerful people in the world, there's one person in the room, like Elijah sitting at the edge of the table, who isn't actually there, and that is capital. And what that means is that you abdicate within capitalism all responsibility to capitalism, which means capital is responsible for all of it, which means, hey, if I benefit from my relationship to this system and I get to sup at its teats, I get to live life where I don't have to dig for my existence, where I don't have to provide alienating, painful labor, where I don't have to spend time in my body uncomfortably. I can do that, but then I don't have to extract it directly from somebody else. Oh my God, who wouldn't take that deal? Because it's the fault of the market. The market's making us do this, and that's what libertarians mean when they say that that's what liberty means. Because they are spiritually dead, but they have been spiritually lobotomized by capitalism. They recognize a situation where, because capitalism does, at the end of the day, enforce itself on people. People do not exert their force on it. Therefore, freedom cannot be possible under capitalism. Libertarians basically say, yes, but you can create a system where you can create a situation where culturally, all of the people who are benefiting from, thanks to technology, all of the people who are benefiting from the dividing of Earth into two spheres, exploiters and exploited, where the misery of the one becomes more and more and the luxury and decadence of the other becomes more and more. You can make a situation where the political concept of a human person only applies to people who benefit from the system. And that is a situation where, yes, you are pursuing maximal liberty, because the people who will be ground into disgusting the people who are going to be ground into dog food by the system, by the division of people into the exploiter and the exploited class, they don't count. They're not really supposed to be here. They have failed in the meritocratic contest of the market. And really, that is what all strains of liberalism, broadly defined, meaning conservatism, meaning fascism, yes, meaning fascism, meaning left liberalism, as we understand it, like the vocabulary of the left online and in culture of social liberalism, girded to capitalism, all of them have the same logic, which is that you're going to, in the future, create a situation where there is maximal hyper-exploitation in your face on the very other side of maximal decadence. And it's going to be enforced by a regime of technology and market relationships. And that is going to be it. And you don't have to actually do the exploiting, but you have to watch. The machines will do the exploiting. You have to watch. And if you're okay with it, if you feel okay with it, and you've created a situation where everybody feels okay with it, then you have created a system of maximal personal liberty. The anarchist dream. The anarchist dream, the libertarian dream. The dream of fully automated luxury, whatever you want to call it, communism, heaven on earth, everyone free from market coercion, everybody able to exercise their own desires in life, free of any friction. Why? Because friction has been taken up by everybody outside the bubble. But you have to be okay with it. And that's what libertarianism strives to do. Create a system where the people who count as people don't care. They think it's good. They think it's the world working itself out as it should be. The left alternative to this, and it's the only one, it's the socialism to that barbarism, is the competing argument that we can get to that point. We can get to that point where we're all free in a way that everybody living in the system would understand themselves to be free. Free to live, free to explore ourselves in our time in life, free of the friction of the coercion because of the provision of bounty. Now, is that possible in the near term? Hell no, not even the medium term. But as like a long term, like the way Kim Stanley Robinson imagines it, or even longer, it's certainly possible, but it would have its basis in a political movement that overthrows this notion and replaces it with a bedrock human solidarity as like a religious, as in believed in with the power of religion to counteract the belief that is to the power of metaphysical in money that currently rules. A counter-hegemonic value system because it's spiritual. We talk about how capitalism is killed God, it has replaced God. It is spiritual. People fight for capitalism with their spirit as much as fucking crusaders did. They believe what they're doing. Now, right now, they don't have to do much but kind of watch everything because the system is running technologically and technocratically. But that's going to change with time as conditions deteriorate. And the violence is going to get more in our face. It's going to be harder to look away from. And we're going to have to decide whether to be participants and which side we're going to be participants on. And what's going to motivate people to pick the side of capital, even though they think it's race or they think it's they think that it's religion because they're all evangelical fucking Christians. They think it's rational. They think that it's logical. It's a holy war. It's a holy war on behalf of capital, where there is no human community. Humanity doesn't exist. I am the only thing that exists. We are all competing gods without any ability to humble oneself in front of the other for fear of being destroyed because the social, the metaphysical connection does not transcend our separateness. That's the underlying assumption, and it is a religious one because it's not scientific, it's not rational, it is religious. It was created by capitalism. It is forged from capitalist relations, social relations.